All right, guys, so we're going to quickly review over the stuff that we talked about before we left the break. But, before we get started, today we're gonna be looking at, technological, political, and social changes that's gonna be happening during Nixon, Ford, and Carter's presidency, so we're gonna be focusing on that. More specifically, well, that's the wrong stuff. Anyway, we're gonna be looking at how the Soviet Union and the United States is coping with each other, what's going on with the Vietnam War, the Camp David Accords, and also stuff that's going on with women and the environment. But before we get to that, what do you guys remember about either Kennedy or Johnson's presidencies? So, I wrote down a few things here. So, Civil Rights Act, what war was going on during Johnson's presidency?
The Vietnam War.
Vietnam War. What is the Gulf of Tonkin? What was the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Bay of Pigs? Just to give you some ideas. Remember that during that time period, 60s, so 60s onward to 1968, then we're gonna be shifting over into the 70s. So just quickly jot down some stuff you remember, we'll chat about it for a second, and then we'll move on, okay? So, do you guys need any like sentence starters or anything like that? Yeah, no? I can type something real quick. No? So I'll give you guys maybe like 7 minutes, 8 minutes. I'll say 8 minutes. Then we'll get into it. Also guys, we have how many more presidents? We have about 4 more presidents until we're done. So as soon as we finish that, we do have another test coming up, and then we'll have milestones. So I would start looking back over your Truman and Eisenhower stuff onward, just to be kind of familiar. And then we have to start reviewing for ourselves, because we gotta know first semester and second semester for that. Okay. We'll have a more defined review thing for that, hopefully by the end of this week. So we can start getting into that stuff. Yes.
Look up at the administration one, right?
Oh yeah, you just, yeah, and then we're just jotting it down, if you're, oh yeah, whenever you get that, the reading for that's on class under, did you have on paper? I don't know. If you're not in school. The reading is on class under week before we were break, so take your time to rush, just as long as I get it before like the cutoff for the whatever the late work is for my department, I don't know yet, but as long as I do that.
Is Trey's sister a man or a woman? Is it transgender? Is that a transformer? Is that,
Oh my God, man. Yeah, just jot down a few things, and then we'll get started. I'm gonna try to break this up a little bit because it is a lot of information. But, what we're working on today is gonna be on the computer. Should be writing down your notebooks. Just jot down anything you remember. You have a pencil? You need a pencil? You need one? Five more minutes.
Oh, okay, okay, that's cool.
What do you remember about, Kennedy or Johnson's presidency? So anything we talked about involving their presidencies. So Kennedy's assassination, the Bay of Pigs, Cuban Missile Crisis, what happened with the Civil Rights Movement, the Vietnam War, oh, Great Society as well. Anything you remember? How do the American people feel about the Vietnam War? Stuff like that. Whatever you remember.
Yes.
Should be jotting down.
I am. Camera's distracting.
You're definitely playing the game. Alright guys, we got like 4 more minutes. We're gonna get started.
I didn't try to, he just walked in that bitch. He just stand there, like, he didn't move, and he just sat there. He couldn't move.
Kennedy and Johnson know that they're my people.
But why?
I'm like,
So just
I got
some of the
text.
events that you remember
I got
that
you.
happened.
I got you.
Right. Well, when we discuss just, you know.
I got you. Not what I discussed, I got you.
Like a minute? Oh, I forgot.
The Knox first? It's Harlan.
What you said, sorry?
The Knox, Ford, and Carter. And I mean Nixon.
That's today.
That's today.
For the other ones?
Yeah.
That one should be Kennedy and Johnson. That one should be like right before break.
Right.
It should say Kennedy and Johnson on the thing. Scroll.
Yeah, no freaking.
Ford, Carter, and Nixon. But that's gonna be on
What?
Google Form. But yeah, don't rush. As long as I can get it to me as soon as possible. She's good to go. All right, y'all. Okay, so based off of some of the things that was written here, what do you guys remember about Kennedy or Johnson's presidencies?
Hey, Kennedy was golden. He was part of, what's it called? Making black people and white people equal. He was always hanging out with Martin Luther King.
Do you remember what those were called?
The marches. I forgot what they call it.
The freedom rights.
Civil rights.
Civil rights. So remember, this is gonna happen after Kennedy is assassinated, but his Civil Rights Act of 1964 and 5 are gonna deal with desegregation and also making sure African Americans have fair chances to vote. Okay. What else happened during Kennedy's presidency?
They killed my boy. They
He does
killed
get
him in
assassinated.
King.
He does get assassinated.
Then
How about conflict with Cuba?
Oh,
You guys remember what that's
the
called?
dictatorship with Castro, right?
Yes. What's that again?
They were in a tight spot, well, it was not like they're on the total.
Not necessarily a Cold War, but it was a
Oh,
conflict.
it's because they were communists and they didn't want the communism to get together. Cause
You guys remember what that's called?
The Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yes. So remember with your Cuban Missile Crisis, remember, like Brian said, the communists in Cuba were just getting started because there was a revolution. Castro takes over. He's like, hey, I'm gonna be leader forever. America does not like that because remember they're trying to contain communism. So the USSR supports them and sends weapons over from Europe into Cuba, and they have this conflict. The Bay of Pigs is a mission that Kennedy tries to do to basically overthrow Castro. It does not work. It ends up in this tension with the Cuban Missile Crisis, where like, hey, we have our weapons pointed at you, and America had their weapons pointed at the USSR. They had to come to an agreement about denegotiating, getting rid of those weapons in Cuba, and America had to decide to agree to get rid of their weapons in Turkey. Okay. What was Sputnik?
The Russians.
What was it? What was it exactly? It was the Russians.
Solar.
Yes, so remember, the USSR is gonna be the first people to put a satellite into space. How did the Americans feel about that?
They thought they would spy on them.
Yes, they were scared, and also they thought it was gonna spy on them, but what did they, you guys remember we did that activity with the missiles? Remember, the nuke map?
Yeah, when they were like striking to see how much people would kill or something like that.
So when the Soviets did that, America was scared they was gonna drop a rocket or a bomb on us. So they had this fear. It starts this whole thing called the space race. It's gonna develop NASA, and America's gonna basically put the first man on the moon during or around Kennedy's presidency to kind of one up the Soviet Union, because remember, we're in competition with them. All right, after Kennedy is assassinated, Johnson's gonna take over. He's going to pass Kennedy's legislations for civil rights. The Vietnam War is gonna break out. Does anybody remember what happened with the Vietnam War?
Oh, what do you mean what happened?
They saw a lot of soldiers.
A lot of soldiers died because of their hitting booby traps, and then we basically lost. Cause we never really won, we never lost.
There was really no clear winner, but remember, with the Vietnam War, we're trying to contain communism. North Vietnam is what type of government?
It was communism.
Communism. So, America's gonna get involved because remember, in the Gulf of Tonkin, those US ships are gonna get attacked, quote unquote. America's gonna get this blank check called the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. It's gonna basically give America the freedom to do whatever they wanna do in Vietnam without directly declaring war on them, okay? Does anybody remember what the Great Society is that Johnson created during his presidencies? Those social programs, you guys remember any of those programs?
Oh, it's to recover and help people recover, right? People from the army, get them,
What's that?
oh no, that's a different president, isn't it? That's, FR.
Medicare.
Yeah. Medicare. How about, you guys remember that one I was talking about with the little babies going to pre-K? You remember what that program's called? Or have you guys ever seen that? Pretty sure some of y'all probably was in a program that was for that. Head Start gets those families that may not have a lot of money to get their kids to go to daycare and get ready for school. He created a bunch of social programs we still use today. Medicaid, Medicare, all kinds of stuff. So this is Kennedy and Johnson overall. You have a lot of people fighting for their rights when we talk about Cesar Chavez. So now we're shifting from the 1960s into the early 70s. We're gonna talk about Nixon's presidency. So guys, remember, when Nixon is voted into office, the Democrats don't have a clear nominee for their party because remember, John F. Kennedy's brother is assassinated. So when they're going into this election, they have no clear nominee. Nixon is going to appeal to the traditional American people, the silent majority, by basically saying like, hey, I don't agree with all this protests for the war, and he's also going to promise to end the Vietnam War, which is not going to necessarily happen. The Vietnam War is going to span for 19 years. We'll talk about that later. But Nixon's going to get elected because the people believe in what he's telling them. Okay? So we're going to look at 37, 38, and 9. And you guys know, fun fact, Jimmy Carter was the oldest living president.
He died not so long ago.
Yeah, he was like 101.
Yeah, 101.
Okay? So Nixon is going to run off the basis of restoring America to its prime. Basically appealing to those average modern day American conservatives. So he's also going to run on the fact that, hey, I'm going to end the Vietnam War. He's going to say that publicly, but privately he's going to basically keep the war going as he is going through office. Another thing Nixon is going to do, because the United States and the Soviet Union still have tension, he is going to start to create a relationship with China so that China can move away from the USSR. Yes. Yes. To basically destabilize the USSR. So he's going to be the first United States president to visit China with the idea of to, if we build this relationship, we can make the USSR weaker. So he is going to basically create this relationship, and he's going to agree to this one China policy. What you guys need to know about that one China policy is that basically Taiwan is considered its own country, but because they have their independence from China, America's going to basically agree to back China with the idea that Taiwan is a part of China. Okay? So this is going to create a good relationship with us and China at this particular time. Also, a fun fact about that, because Nixon is able to build that relationship, we are able to have pandas. That's why a couple of years ago when China decided to take all the pandas back in the United States, that was a symbol of like our foreign policy being good. When they took those pandas back to China, that's why we don't have any. Okay? Make sense? So Nixon's gonna go to China to build a relationship to destabilize the Soviet Union. Because he wants to make communism not as stable. Make sense? Alright, so as we know, Nixon's gonna go into office, the Vietnam War is still gonna be going on. What's gonna happen?
You said destabilize what?
Sorry?
You said destabilize what?
Oh, the Soviet Union. So the USSR, those communists over in Europe, he's gonna try to destabilize them because he doesn't want them to kind of have more influence over the world at this point. Because remember, America still does not want communism to spread past the areas it's already in. Okay. So Nixon's going in with the Vietnam War. Remember, there's a lot of protests against this war because the American people feel like it is a bad thing. We're wasting a lot of money. No side is really winning. They're losing men all over the place. So you have negative press about that. Because he's able to negotiate a good relationship with China, they're going to have this peace treaty to basically pull out of Vietnam. So supporting those Viet Cong in Vietnam is going to stop from China. Okay? Another thing that's going to happen, you guys know that the Gulf of Tonkin resolution was basically the Americans' blank check to do whatever they wanted to do in Vietnam. And it also gave the president the power to declare war on another country. Well, like I said, Vietnam War is going to go on for 19 years. What's going to happen is that Congress is going to pass the Wars Powers Act, which is basically going to limit the amount of time the troops can be overseas. So if you guys think about when we were over in Iraq and Afghanistan, we can only be over there for a certain amount of time because otherwise you're going against this Wars Powers Act. No other war has gone on for 19 years like Vietnam. They didn't want that to happen again. So this is putting the power to declare war and be actively involved in a war back in Congress' hands. So, which country does President Trump not like? I'm trying to think. Yeah, which country does he have in Ukraine?
Ukraine.
Let's say Ukraine. We'll use Ukraine because Canada's too close. So let's say, for instance, if President Trump wanted to declare war on Ukraine for whatever reason, he has to go through Congress and the House of Representatives. He can't just say, "Here, we're going to war." No, there's a process. That power is now back with the Senate and the House of Representatives.
I mean, every state has one, right?
Just overall, they have to all vote. So you have your representatives from each state. Remember, your Senate has 2, and your House of Representatives has your representatives based off of how many people there are. So you can have 2, 3, 4, just depends. And you can lose and gain seats. It just depends on how many people are moving where they're in each state. That makes sense so far, y'all?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna just get to Watergate and then I'm gonna stop and then we're gonna go work on this portion of this work and then I'll come back. So you guys ever heard about Watergate? Nixon is gonna be running for re-election. And he's going to win. However, some stuff that he does to get re-elected is gonna pop back up because he is going to, maybe not knowingly, maybe he knew, it's not really clear. Basically, some people that work for people who work for him is going to break into this, complex where the Democrats usually, you do their business. They're gonna break in there, they're going to plant these microphones so they can figure out what type of campaign strategies the Democrats are gonna use to run against him. This is gonna get out, and then like, hey, who put you in here? Basically, they're like, hey, it was Nixon. So, of course, the American people are gonna be like, what kind of president would do something like this? This is a whole big scandal. I'm gonna show you guys a clip from Forrest Gump in a second. This is a whole big scandal. What's gonna happen is they're gonna draw up impeachment papers. Anybody know what impeachment is?
To get them removed from the office.
Yes. So they're gonna draw up impeachment papers against Nixon. He does not want to be the first president impeached, so guess what he does? He resigns. Okay? So I'm gonna stop right there real quick. I'm gonna show you guys this video from Forrest Gump, and then we're gonna hop into our activity real quick. Yes. Alright, so really quick.
Ping pong team met with President Nixon today at an Oval
Well,
Office.
you know, a few months later, they invited me and the ping pong team to visit the White House. So I went again, and I met the President of the United States again. Only this time, they didn't get us rooms at a real fancy hotel.
So are you enjoying yourself in our nation's capital, young man?
Yes, sir.
Well, where are you staying? It's called a hotel, yeah, but, I know a much nicer hotel, it's brand new, very modern. I'll have my people take care of it for you.
Is that actually Nixon?
Yeah, they just
Yeah.
put him in the.
You might want to send a maintenance man over to that office across the way. The lights are off and they must be looking for a fuse box or something, because them flashlights, they're keeping me awake. Thank you. Good night.
Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
Alright, so basically that's Forrest Gump, the movie, basically making reference to Watergate, because they were in the office at night with flashlights to plant those things. They got found out. This makes the American people very angry. They start to have this mistrust in our government. So before I move on to the next portion of this lecture, on eClass, there is 2 links you need to click on. And let me know if the form is not working, because the first block is having a time with their lives. That one. Let's see. So, first one should say readings for Google Form. form, the other one should say Nixon Fort Carter, Google form. You should be able to open it, and it should let you type in it. Please let me know if it's not working. What we're gonna do for the first portion of it is, I'm gonna go over the first one with you guys, and then, go from there. What we're gonna do on Wednesday is use the same information if we don't finish to create, some, skits. So your Google form should look like that. Let me know if you guys can't type in it. And then we have our reading. Should look like this. Were you able to get in there? Alright, were you guys able to open it up? I don't know why that email button is right
Wait,
there.
what is that?
On E-Class, under today,
My E-Class or Google Classroom?
E-Class. You should be able to click on one and it should say readings for Google form, and then there's a Google form that says Nixon Fort Carter. You should be able to open that and make a copy.
I'm thinking of making my E-Class next year.
Yes, I'm going straight to Google.
Why not?
I don't know, it's a decision they made at the county. I just work here. I don't know.
What day is it on?
It should be under, the 14th. Should be.
There's only 13, 16.
Oh, found it.
One of the big pages says 14th, but yeah, the 13th should be there. So those two links that's under the slides, we'll pop those open. Can you make a copy? And then let me know if you guys can type in it, cause last
No, you
block.
just click on it, it just makes a copy immediately.
It is, okay. Can you type in it?
No.
Really?
No, yes.
Okay, so I was like, yeah, first block, I couldn't figure out how to get it to work, and I figured it out, so hopefully. Okay,
You know, I should put a school email, right?
yeah, just put your school email. I didn't add that in there, I don't know how that got added in there, but, yeah, just type your school email and then we'll go from there. Alright, everybody good in the Google form? Or you need a few minutes to get in there? Yes, it's not on Google, go to E-Class. Yeah, it wouldn't let me add it to Google, I don't know why it was acting funny, so I put it on E-Class.
I'm trying.
You would have to open both of them, but the form is right there at the bottom. So when you open one, that's the form. And then the other one is the reading, we're gonna look at the reading together.
Or tinting.
And then we're gonna find what the- Was everybody able to get in the form?
The Google form, the
Yeah.
read.
Did you find it?
I never seen it.
Yeah. Should say Nixon Ford Carter.
Oh, yeah, I found it.
Yeah. Everybody got the reading open too?
Do I have to wear my whole
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know how it got added in there. I just had your names on there. I don't know how that added on.
It's okay.
Cause I was struggling with it first block, cause it wasn't letting me type in it, and I don't know. Alright, you guys ready? Alright, so the section of the reading we're gonna be looking at today, well, this portion is gonna be Nixon visits China. So the little portion of the reading we're gonna look at together is gonna basically center around his visit to China. So, one of the definitions for the words you're gonna have to know probably, you're gonna have to know this for our actual unit test, but you're probably gonna see it again on the milestone, I'm pretty sure. So, what we're looking for this section, we're gonna be looking for the definition of detente, we're gonna be looking for what was the purpose of Nixon's visit to China overall. And then we're gonna be looking for what is SALT, which we talked about SALT when we talked about the Cuban Missile Crisis, but we're gonna go back over that too. So, if you open up your reading, this little section right here is what we're gonna be looking at, this first section, okay? Alright, so, I'm gonna just kinda read through this really quickly, okay? Alright. Most remember Richard Nixon as a president whose greatest accomplishments were in foreign policy. Before 1968, U.S. presidents traditionally took a tough militaristic stance towards the USSR and China. Nixon, however, took a new approach. He introduced a policy called détente. Under détente, Nixon sought to use diplomacy rather than intimidation to ease tensions that exist between the United States and communist nations. So for your first little section in your Google form, the definition of détente is to use diplomacy instead of intimidation to negotiate, okay? I don't have a highlighter, I don't think I can highlight here, hold on, let me see. But détente is to use diplomacy instead of intimidation. So, you're gonna use diplomacy rather than intimidation. Okay? Maybe I should make that another color. Okay. So for your first portion, you're gonna use diplomacy instead of intimidation. So, what is the definition of détente? The definition of détente is, what is it again?
Use diplomacy, not intimidation.
Yes. So, like the Reed said, prior presidents are gonna be more tough on communism. So there is a portion of time where Kennedy goes to, I can't remember where he went to. He does go somewhere to kind of meet in the middle ground with the Soviet Union during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And he is taking a more tougher stance, but Nixon decides to, hey, let's try to negotiate. So very similar to how we were talking about with the big stick policy, very similar. We're gonna negotiate, but if we can't negotiate with you, we're gonna have to use military power. All right, everybody good on détente? Everybody got that written down? Okay. So, your next portion of your sheet should be, what was his purpose of going to China? So, Nixon became the first president to publicly acknowledge the communist government of China and even visited that nation during his first term. Nixon also recognized that although both the USSR and China are communist, the two nations disagreed with one another on some major issues. For this reason, Nixon believed that good relations with China will give him more bargaining power with the Soviets. So, number 2, what was the purpose of his visit to China? Based off your answer choices. So, based off your answer choices, what was his main goal of going to China? Was it to establish a military alliance against the Soviet Union? Was it to promote cultural exchange and tourism between the two nations? Was it to start a relationship with China and gain an advantage over the Soviets? Or was it to negotiate trade for the American economy? To the third one? Does everybody agree with that? That it was to start a relationship with China to gain an advantage over the Soviet Union? Everybody agree? Yes. So based on her text, yes, it will be C for that one, okay?
What's
So-
under that? Oh,
It should be C for that one. He wanted to gain an advantage over the Soviets, so he's gonna build a relationship with China because even China and the Soviet Union don't have agreement on everything. Cool?
Cool.
Alright, our next section, what is the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty? We talked about this before during the Crude Missile Crisis, but we're gonna go back over it again. In 1972, after extensive talks with the Soviet Union leader, Lyndon, the US and the USSR signed the first Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty. So, in its name, it has strategic limitation, arms limitation, that tells you already, they're gonna limit the amount of nuclear weapons being created in the United States and also in the Soviet Union. So that's what SALT is. SALT is gonna limit the amount of, nuclear weapons being created in the Soviet Union and the United States. Okay? Alright, y'all. I need you to wake up. This is gonna be a grade. This is also gonna help you do your skits on Wednesday, so please wake up.
Skip?
Yes.
Wanna make a video?
Miz, I'm done with
No,
it.
not a video, but you guys are gonna, use this information that we're gonna be working on. Choose a section, and you're going to teach the class your section of the.
Oh.
I did it, but my computer died.
Come on, dude.
I did it.
Come on.
What?
I really not.
Where's your teacher?
No.
Alright, everybody good on the first section? Yep. Alright, y'all, what is the definition of détente again? Yes. So can everybody repeat after me to use diplomacy instead of intimidation?
To use diplomacy instead of intimidation.
Thank you. Alright, what is the definition of SALT again? Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, blah, blah, blah. What are we limiting?
The number of speed.
Yes. So guys, SALT 1, because apparently there's more than one. SALT 1 is to limit nuclear weapons. Okay? You guys are gonna see that again, I'm sure. It was on our first test for this unit, for the last unit. Alright, so we're gonna move to this next section. Okay? Alright, so our next section